Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us for our midday devotional. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Today, we will continue our series on just talking about the various dynamics that are happening with this, not just the pandemic, but also with what's taking place globally with uh, the age differences and what's happening around the country with uh, the population shift. I've got a slide up on the screen, and I hope that you can see it, that deals with a growing phenomena in the United States. And that growing phenomena is called millennials. The millennials are outgrowing population wise the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, uh, and not only numerically, but they are also outgrowing the baby boomers, my generation, the Gen Xers, uh, financially. They are the upcoming force to be reckoned with in this world. If you take a look at this graph, again from the Pew Research Center, looking from 1994 to 2017, uh, if you look at baby boomers in 1994, uh, and you look at how many were in the labor force, it was huge. But now, if you look at baby boomers, you notice how it's on a downward trend from 66 million baby boomers in the labor force down to, as of 2017, 41 million. Now, the Gen Xers from 1994 were going up, and around 2008 or so, uh, they topped over 54 million individuals in the workforce. But you may notice it just kind of plateaued from 54, and now it's down to about what, 53 million. But I want you to watch a phenomena that's happening. These millennials in 1994, they were just being born for all practical purposes. Uh, but then they went into young adulthood, uh, college age, graduated from college 3, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. But look at what's happening in the workplace. That is constantly trending upward to where now in the workforce, it's over 56 million millennials. Uh, to me, that's impressive. There are only 41 million baby boomers. There are only 53 million Gen Xers. Uh, that silent number, born before 1945, comprising now only 3% of the workforce. So, what this is telling us, if we can read the handwriting on the wall, we should be able to see that we must decrease and they must increase. They're increasing in terms of their presence in the workforce. They're increasing in terms of they become a market that must be contended with uh, in the financial area, and the place where they are also making an impact, believe it or not, are in the churches. But it's not quite the impact that we would like for it to have been. Because what is happening with the millennials, as we talked on yesterday, for some reason, there's a greater contentment with doing things their own way. I mean, I'm not expecting Gen Xers, nor am I expecting millennials to do things exactly the way that I do them, because I didn't do it the exact same way the silent aging group before me did it. But what should be expected from generation to generation is that the basic God principle, the basic foundation, should never, ever be shaken. We are experiencing that right now in the United States. Uh, there are some principles that shouldn't be touched. Uh, Equal rights, I think we need to make an argument for equal rights, equal pay for equal work. Let's make an argument for that. Racial equality, let's make an argument for that as well. Uh, but when a person decides they're not going to abide by the constitutional norms when it comes to something as simple as an election, a national election, a transition of power. See, that's a bridge too far. And what is happening in the religious circle with church and many millennials' view of church is that they are changing that. They said what they needed, but they implied who they didn't need. Uh, have you ever heard the term, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, or I'm religious, but I'm not spiritual? What in the world does that mean? It sounds one way, but it may take on a whole different meaning. Look at the text that I've got before you, and then we'll get back to the data that's been collected by the Pew Research Group. In Genesis chapter 11, verses 3 through 8, they began saying to each other, who are the they? Remember now, there's been a flood, there's been a global flood. The world, save for Noah and his family, has been wiped out. The world now is repopulated. God has purged it. It's being repopulated. People are on the move again. People are doing things socially. People are interacting. They've got families. They've got opportunities galore before them. And then they began saying to each other, let's make brick and harden them with fire. Nothing wrong with that, because in that region, bricks were used instead of stone, and tar was used for mortar. See, they're moving up. They're becoming creative. That they are building with different material than just huge stone. Uh, and then they said, "Come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world. I don't know if you see what's happening. A great generation of people, great skills that they've learned how to make bricks, how to harden them using fire. And they've gotten away from lifting and carving out the heavy stones and transporting it, building their families, building wealth, using their ingenuity. And then somebody comes up with this idea, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky so that the whole world will know us, making us famous and keeping us from being scattered all over the world. This becomes the North Star for us. And every time people look at that great statue, that great tower, they'll know that this is home, and they can always find their way back to this place. But I want you to look at Genesis 11 again. As the people are saying, let's do this, God says, but the Lord came down, looked at the city and the tower the people were in process of building. Look at that, he said. The people are united and they are speaking the same language. Nothing wrong with being united. Nothing wrong with speaking the same language. Nothing wrong with being industrious. And he said, if they complete this project, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. The only problem is the project is for the wrong motive. They're taking their eye off of God. God is elevated much higher than a tower. God is in the heavens. But they're saying if we could get people to focus on this, that's as far as we need to go. We don't need to this God that's beyond. So God said, come, let's go down and confuse its people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other. The brightest generation, the most industrious generation, intellectual generation, articulate generation, understanding the science and the physics. And God says their motives are wrong. And if I allow them to continue with these wrong motives, they are going to destroy generations to come. When you look at the population in the days of that Babel Tower, go, let's do it now. Let us build a city and let us build a tower. But God said, let's go too. But let's go down there and confound their language. Every generation has vain contractors. But we are living in a generation of millennials who are on a downward spiral away from God in the heavens. Church attendance among millennials is down. Formal worship, biblically, I'm not talking about they're not assembling, they are assembling. But in terms of biblically, adhering to the word of God is off. Their resources are being wasted. And their dreams of independence. See, that's what was going on at that Babel scene. Their dreams of independence in Genesis 11 is going to fail. It did fail. So, what we're trying to avert, what we're trying to cut off today, is for one of the most academic, one of the most astute generations, these millennials. We're hoping that they do not fail. But here is a guarantee. If they turn away from God, no matter how successful they are in this world, they have failed. And as this boomer generation, my oldest son's generation, we have a responsibility to the millennials to encourage them, to caution them, to love them, not to go in the way of the people that decided how they were going to worship and how they were going to have a relationship with God. That's our responsibility as a generation of people. Remember yesterday I showed you this slide in terms of the silent generation, 84% was Christian. But with the millennial generation, only 49% are Christian. In the silent generation born between 1928 and 1945, only 4% adhered to non-Christian faiths, and only 10% adhered to unaffiliated. But when you look at generation baby boomers, my oldest son's generation, 76% were still Christian. When you look at the Gen Xers, or 76%, the baby boomers, I'm sorry, is my generation. Gen Xers, my son's generation. But then look at the dramatic drop, 49%. That's almost less than half. But look at this, unaffiliated. Well, we're not connected to any one group. We just kind of go where we like what they're saying. We listen that if they're making us feel good about ourselves. But that's not the purpose of the gospel. The gospel is God's message that empowers, but it's God's message that is a message of redemption. It's a message of God's love. It's a message that communicates God has a finality that is bigger than any finality that you can write. Our finality is found in heaven. Blessed are the dead who dies in the Lord, because from henceforth, once death take place, we move on to another place. That's not going to change for the millennials. It's still going to be true. But if the towers and the hope is built in this earth, then the permanent place that God has in store, it's going to be lost. Now, let me share this with you before we wrap today. This is just sort of a bar graph of what I just showed you. Look at the silent great people between 1928 and 1945 birth. 21 million that were in the workforce in 1994. But you notice they began retiring. 1994, 50% of the workforce was baby boomers. That's my generation, 1994. Uh, I mean, we were in our prime. Uh, but then when you look at the Gen Xers, my son, uh, they were only 29% of the labor force in 1994. My oldest son graduated from college in 2000. I remember that well because on the same day he graduated from college, he got married, moved to San Diego, and that has been his home for 20 years. Has raised a family, doing well, settled in. Uh, but I want you to see something. On this scale in 1994, the millennials are not listed. You know why? They were children. But now move over to 2017. 35% of the labor force in 2017 were millennials. You know why? They were out of college. This is when the first wave of millennials, around 2016, when President Obama was coming into office. Millennials, for the most part, were going into college, or the first wave were coming out of college. Uh, I'm sorry, yeah, and I'm sorry, in 2012 is uh, what year did he go into presidency? He was in 8 years, 2016. So 2008 is so around 2012, the millennials were coming out of college. And by 2012, that's when President Obama was coming into power. And he was in power for 8 years from 2012 to 2016, or you do the math. I'm not that good at math. But look at the boomers. This is my generation. There are only 25 million of us in the workforce, and this was as of 2017, and it's probably less now. It's decreasing. This group is on the rise, but it is our responsibility to encourage this millennial group and this post-millennial group, the kids who are in high school now, the children who are in college now. These are the post-millennials. They are bringing up the rear. And we must also encourage them to be the banner carriers for Christianity and not sideline, because more and more of the millennials and the post millennials are sidelining when it comes to Christianity. And that's why I'm really emphasizing that we've got to encourage them and we've got to motivate them, because Christianity, moving to this unaffiliated area, we don't want that, to where our smart, our intelligent, our financially solvent millennials are traveling, vacationing, buying their own homes, doing investments, but are they investing in their soul? This is where I'm really trying to press this point. Let's encourage them in those other avenues, but we've got to impress upon this generation, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And what can they give in exchange for their soul? Let me invite you to pray with me at this time. Father, it's your grace, it's your mercy that keeps us. You prosper us, you bless us, you deliver us from evil. And Father, I just pray that regardless of the generation we find ourselves in, I pray that we will never forsake you, that we'll never substitute money, fame, fortune, opportunities. I pray that we will never forfeit those material things for your grace, for your love, and for your promise of heaven. Help us, Father, to remain focused on things that are spiritual. Through Christ I pray. Amen. Thank you for joining me for our midday devotional. And it's my prayer that today's class has been uplifting and encouraging, especially in the midst of the time that we live in. Um, Continue to pray for this country. We are in a very, very trying time. Continue to pray for those who are sick, those who are just going through life. And I look forward to seeing you back tomorrow at noon as we wrap up the week with our